Hey, welcome back. Today, for this only recorded, so there's no audience or anything session, I'm just going to go over some miscellaneous DevOps things that are related to how you can get your web application and put it online so that everyone can see it. Just for reference, this is my third time recording this from the top, so you have to forgive me a little bit, but I will make sure that we cover everything. So what are we going to talk about today? I'm going to make a sample Create React app. So the same kind of normal thing that you've been doing for your learning labs. Then I'll talk about how you can get it online. And we're going to use a service called Netlify, which provides continuous deployment, and I'll explain what that means. During that process, I'm going to also talk about the Git workflow. So how you can create a new branch, then you commit to that branch, then you make a pull request. That should answer a question that someone asked about protected branches and why that's important. And then after that, I'm also going to talk about GitHub Actions, which is a CI service, so continuous integration, and why that's helpful. And then I will briefly talk, not super in depth, but I'll briefly talk about DNS and how you can get your own domain for your own website. So yeah, very exciting stuff. But let's get started. So I'm going to make a new sample repository, and I'm doing the ACM org. So I'm going to do usually ACM, blah, blah, blah. I don't know, CRA DevOps example. Used for learning labs crash course. And I'm trying to do this from scratch just so I can show you like how easy it is and so that you can kind of follow along. So since you are only watching from home, please pause the video at any time if you need it. But yeah, in this case, I'm going to make it public, and I'm not going to add any new files because I'm going to make this from Create React app on my computer, and I'm going to upload it. So we'll create our repository. Very exciting. And then, yeah, it's going to tell us to do this thing. So I'm going to go to my computer. I'm going to make a new Create React app with npx. So kind of, the same thing we've been talking before. And I'll call it the same thing too, because we're good naming developers. So this is kind of a bit of a refresher on what's going on. I want to quickly talk about while this, actually pretty fast. I was going to say while this installs, but I already have like a package just cached, like run this command like 5 times. What's going on here though? So very briefly, when you use Git on your computer, you're working on the local copy of Git, right? And so GitHub is like another copy of your Git repository, but it's somewhere else in the world. And so every time you want to make a change and upload it, right? Oh, that's my GPGP. You need to push it. And so it goes from your local to your remote. So this is actually what's going on, is that you're setting the remote. You're saying, hey, the like real version of my repository should be stored on this server. And this server turns out to be the one on GitHub, and they'll provide you the URL. Oh, I didn't go into the yet. My bad. There are so many things here. What was this called again? CRA DevOps example. So I'll add the remote. So this command means, hey, add this thing and call it origin. Origin is like the default remote. And then we'll just push to origin. So this is like just how you would get started, okay? And I will say that in general, in the future, you should follow what I'm about to do right now before you write any actual code, because it'll make your life a lot easier. Cool? Okay, so now we have our app, and I guess you can just trust me that it works. But let's make a quick change just so we know it's not the boilerplate code. So I'm going to open this in my code editor of choice. And let's do this. And I'm going to show you how to do everything from the command line just to make your life a lot easier. So we're doing DevOps stuff. Great. So I know this is going to compile, so I'm not going to run it, but you should. But what actually happens when you compile your code? So what will happen is that you'll need to run npm run build somehow. And this actually runs some other command that Create React app has set up. But as you can see, it says it's creating an optimized production build. And I want to point out how important this is. So what basically, it does a few things. If you have any compilation in your code, like TypeScript, for example, it'll compile your code. And then I'll do a bunch of module bundling related stuff. So what this means is that when you use that import React from React statement, it'll take the parts of React that it actually needs and put them into your app. But it's not going to put in the parts that it doesn't need. And that's a really big deal, because I want you to take a look at this for a second. So if we take a look at the folder that has all of our stuff, the size of this folder is going to be kind of obscene. It's going to be in like the hundreds of megabytes, which is really disappointing. So yeah, this is 257 megabytes for a website, which is kind of ridiculous, right? But if we look at what Create React App is telling us, after it did all of its bundling and then did some compression and it ran some compression algorithms, so gzip is one compression algorithm, it gives you a much smaller bundle. So in this case, the bundle is about 40 kilobytes. So we went from 260 megabytes to 40 kilobytes with the compilation step. So as you can imagine, this compiling portion is a really important part of our website. So that's what we have to do. You can't just, run npm start on like a web server and have it work out of the box. Cool. Okay. So now we're going to, did we already push? Yeah. So right now, if you notice, the last change, the commit, was initialize project using Create React App. But actually, I have a different change. And I'm going to do all this from the command line just to make sure that everyone can do it from home. But if you want to use a visual tool, I would encourage you to do that. It's very easy. So first, I'm typing Git Status. Git Status is going to tell us what has changed. And in this case, it's saying, hey, this file has changed, but you haven't done anything with it. So we're going to first stage it for commit. And we're going to do that with the git add command. So what this means is that we want to commit this change eventually, but we haven't done it yet. You can always git add and git restore files back and forth. There's no problem at all. I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use the star text. So that's a glob pattern. It just means everything. So in this case, there's only one thing. I don't want to type out source app.js. I'm super lazy. Maybe if there's a file you're not ready to commit, you won't type it in. But anyway, besides the point. If I run git status now, this is going to be green. So this means that it's ready to be committed. So now I'm going to commit. I have to type in this -s command. If you're at home, you don't have to. So don't type in this -s command. And then you can either just hit enter. This will take you to a text editor and you just enter a message. But I'm a bit lazy, so I'm going to use the -m flag. And that says, it takes it a string, and I'm just going to put in the string, what I want to commit. So I'm going to say modifies app.js. Cool. So I'm going to push that. And so commit that. Then I type in git push, and that's going to push this change and put it onto GitHub. So if I refresh my repository now, ta-da, modifies app.js, we're chilling. Okay, so that was a very basic Git workflow. We're actually going to come back to that later and talk about pull requests. But for now, I want to quickly switch gears and talk about how we can let people see this online. So I'm going to go to Netlify. So Netlify is like, I'll put a link in the description. But Netlify is a company that does static site continuous deployment. So those are a lot of words. What does that mean? So static site websites are websites that are just HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And if you notice, even though we use Node and all these other complicated things when we make our React app, the final stuff that was built was just CSS and JavaScript and an HTML file. So you can see here, this is a JS file, this is JS, this is CSS. So that means that we're totally chilling, no problems at all. And most of the stuff that you'll make in Learning Labs or part of the Teacher Lite Dev team or most of the facets that are watching this video are probably going to be front end only. So there's going to be no server or anything. And those are usually static sites. So you can use Netlify for all those things. You can also use many other providers. One really popular one is GitHub Pages. And I included a write-up about that for task 1, the portfolio. So you can take a look at that if you want. But we're going to talk about Netlify today. But yeah, that's what Netlify does. Very quickly, what's not a static site? Something that involves a server. So like a database kind of related thing, if your website needs to run some Java code or PHP or whatever, you're going to have to use a server, and then that's no longer just a static site. Okay, very long rant. Long story short, go to netlify.com, make an account. You can make one from your GitHub account. It's very convenient. I recommend that you do that. Then you're going to get to this page. I have a lot of stuff here because I use this all the time, but you're not. We're just going to hit the new site from Git. And it says it's very easy, and I'm going to tell you it's extremely easy. So first, we're just going to connect this to our GitHub account. And the reason why is because it's going to spy on our GitHub account and see every time a change gets made, like a commit, right? So I'm going to change ourselves to the ACM org because that's what we're doing. CRA DevOps example, that's us. Very quickly, what does this page mean? So the owner, this has to do with pricing and billing. I wouldn't really worry about that for now. the branch to deploy. So you'll pick the branch that you want to put on the internet for everyone to see. We're mostly the time going to choose master, but sometimes it'll be something different depending on what your team does. Then we have the basic build settings, and these are the most important ones. We don't really care about the advanced ones here. So first is what the build command is. Usually this is either yarn build or npm run build for almost all Node.js projects. I should have chosen to make this project with npm and I didn't, and I forgot. So it's yarn, sorry about that. But for you, it'll probably be npm run build. Then the build directory is just where, after you run that command, is the final stuff on the website going to be. And so for create React app, it's always going to be in the build folder. So now you know. But you can always change these if you want. And if you use different languages or different stacks, like if you use, for example, Jekyll and Ruby or Hugo and Go, you'll have different kind of options here. But for create React app, these are the defaults. And usually Netlify is pretty good at guessing what the defaults are. So I'm going to hit deploy site. So now, let me actually tell you what Netlify does, right? So what it's going to do is every time a commit is made, it'll build your site for you and then deploy it to some URL. So if we click this button right here, we can see that there's some stuff happening, spooky code. But really what Netlify has done is it's spun up like a mini computer. If you're familiar, this is a Docker container. And it's going to install some stuff. So it has guessed that our package involves Node.js, looking at the file extension. So it's going to install Node, it's going to install npm, it's going to install yarn, and then it'll run npm install for us. And then after that, it's going to run our build command, which is, if you remember, it's npm run build or yarn build. Then it'll take what's in the build folder and upload it. And so here it's saying, oh, you know, everything was good, no problems, we're chilling. So far, life is very good. And as you can see, you know, did the gzip stuff. This is actually going to line up, because gzip is deterministic, it's going to line up line by line with these two things. So that's kind of a cool fun fact. And these things are the same as well because they're hashed, but not really cool. Anyways, then it's done some stuff and it says, oh, the site is live. Cool, let's take a look. So if we go to preview deploy right here, it'll take us to this like random URL. This one says modest habit E97347. This is just randomly generated for you. And this site will always have the latest change that you've made. Okay, so that's a really, really convenient feature, because that means that moving forward, every time you make a change, Netlify will deal with building the site and uploading it. You don't have to. And then after about a minute or two, this link will be updated, and it's going to be the same link every time. Will be updated with your change. And you can just share that link with people. So yeah, that's how Netlify works. I'm going to quickly kind of switch gears, but not really, and talk about now the Git workflow and how we would prefer that you use Git and GitHub when you make your learning labs. And I'm kind of cognizant this is definitely going to run over time. Cool. So if you notice, when I made my change before, I just committed it to master. And if you work by yourself on projects, that's usually fine. But you can imagine that if you work with many people on your projects, you're going to run into problems, right? What if two people edit the same file and maybe one person's edit actually changes how the other person's function works? That's not good. So in order to avoid that, we want to use branches. And so branches is a feature of Git where you can kind of create two different, like, divergent branches of your code. Two people can work on them separately. And then when you're ready, you can merge them back together. And if you've taken CS35O, this is already very familiar for you, or I hope it is. But if not, I'll quickly just run you through some of the basics anyways. And this is how we would prefer that you work on projects with teams, like in your learning labs. So I'm going to be my command line again. I'm going to type in git checkout. And git checkout means we're going to change our branch. I'm going to do -b, and I don't know. I'm just going to, this is going to be a really trivial change. I'm going to call the branch trivial change. So I made a new branch, okay? If I type in git branch, it'll tell you what branch you're on. So there's a master branch, but I'm not on that branch right now, okay? Because again, as we said, I don't want to change master and impact someone else's work. So now I'm just going to make some change. So I'll say, you know, I don't want this. We're doing DevOps stuff. Look at our great code practices. Great. So I've made a change. If I go to Git Status now, it'll say, oh, you've made a change. Solid. So I'll type in Git add, you know, the normal stuff, the same thing that we did last time. And again, I'm going to have to type in -s. You don't have to do that at home. -m, and I'm just going to say a minor trivial change. Cool. And then I'll just type in git push. And then, oh no, we're gonna get an error. So this has to do kind of with what I mentioned earlier about remote versus local. So on our copy of our Git branch, we've created a new branch called trivial change. But the GitHub version doesn't actually know that, right? If we go back to this repository right here, this says it's only one branch. So we need to tell GitHub and tell Git, hey, the branch I've made on my local one, I want to copy it and put it online. So it's going to suggest us do this. We can just do that. The reason why this is just an error and they don't do it automatically is because sometimes you'll set different remotes for different branches. But in this case, it's not important. So we'll run that command. We're chilling. We'll do some work. And then we'll refresh our page. And ta-da, we've now made a new branch called trivial change. Very exciting. So I'm going to go to the pull request option. I think I might have to give me one sec question. Let me just make sure I toggle the setting. Cool. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to now go to the pull request section of GitHub. So a pull request is how we merge something from one branch to another branch. And in this case, master is always going to be the default branch, the one that we want to push the changes into or pull the changes into. And then the branch that has the new feature is the one that's called trivial change. So GitHub usually gives you this like very convenient thing, but I'm not going to do it because I'll show you how to do it from scratch. We hit new pull request. There's a base and a compare. So the base is almost always going to be master, and this is the one that is the default thing, the one you want to put the changes into. Then compare, or feature in some other software languages, or head or whatever tracking, is going to be the branch that has the changes you want to do. So in this case, it's trivial change are going to be our compare. We're not going to change base. Then it gives us a file diff. This is very convenient because you can make sure that all the changes are the ones that you want. And we'll hit create pull request. I will say it's usually very good practice to explain what your change is. In this case, it's so trivial that it doesn't matter. So I can just hit create pull request. But I'll just quickly show you like what you should in general be doing. So I'll show you an ACM and a non-ACM example. So this is an open source project called Stylent. I just contributed to it every now and then because we use it upstream in some of our packages. And yeah, so I made this change. It's a very trivial change actually, but I wrote an explanation of how it works, right? So I said, hey, this GitHub issue, so if you like click this link, someone else submitted a bug report saying, oh, there's a problem with the code. And I said, okay, so I want to fix that problem. And I walk the person through exactly what the changes I made so that when they're reviewing the code, they can easily understand the logic that I went through to make that change. And then I comment on any weird things. In this case, there's like an edge case that I'm not sure about, so I ask them for help. That's kind of how that works. That's pretty important. It's a big part of the process. And I'm not going to ever enforce this on people in learning labs, but I suggest that you do it. It's good practice. And when you work at big companies, like for example, at Amazon, I have to explain all of the changes I make in all of my PRs. Sometimes, right, this will be kind of like a back and forth thing as you discuss what the best way to do it is. So for example, in this case, this is another PR that I did merge, right? So originally, I wrote some stuff and I said, hey, I don't know, blah, 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 there's a problem here. So then the maintainer of the package said, okay, cool. So this is how you should do it. And then we kind of went back and forth on GitHub. And then eventually I made all the changes that we needed to. And then everyone said they were okay. So this entire process is called code review. And it's a really important part of the software development process, right? Because it's really important that, when I make changes to big code bases, that someone else double checks and makes sure that my code is okay. Because I might miss something really important like I did when I made this pull request. In fact, in some projects, you have to do this. So in Stylent, for example, in order to merge a pull request, you have to get someone else to review and approve it. So this previous one I just showed you, no one else has approved it because I made it like earlier yesterday. So I can't even click the merge button, right? And that's because it says someone needs to review it for it to be merged, and they need to approve it. So this is a really important part of software development. Again, at most big tech places, you'll do this. And also in TeachLA, I enforce this for our bigger projects like the editor and the website. So I've also enforced this for your learning labs. So I've made the master branch what's called protected. So you can't push to master directly. You have to make a pull request, get it reviewed, get an approving review, and then make the change. So if you're watching at home and you're on Array of Sunshine or digression on regression. Please keep that in mind. You have to do this. But yeah, that's how the entire process works. In this case, though, for our original thing, I'm not going to do that because it's a trivial change. So I'm just going to hit merge pull request. But before I do that, very quickly, cool feature. So Netlify actually also deploys your PRs. So we haven't merged this yet, but this has already changed. So this is really convenient for code review because then I can just go on your thing and look at it. So it's another really useful feature of Netlify. Really love it. But in this case, I'm just going to hit merge. We're chilling. And then, yeah, it'll be done. You can delete the branch after that happens. It's good practice, too. And then when we go back to master, we're going to see, hey, there's a new commit that said we merged the pull request. And if we go to the file that we edited, we're going to see that the change was made. So we're doing good. Yeah, and then if we go to Netlify, go back to Netlify for a moment, it's going to say, hey, okay, so we got a new pull request. We're going to build that and deploy it. So again, this is how Netlify is really, really useful. Super great tool, makes it easy, makes your life really easy, and you don't have to worry about this kind of stuff. So if you think about it, right, once we spent that like first 10 minutes setting it up, never have to touch it again. We're chilling. Life is good. Okay. Been pretty long already, but I did promise someone that we were going to go over GitHub Actions very briefly, and then I'll just tell you what DNS is, but I'm not going to show you. So what happens if you introduce a bug into your code, right? So let's say, for example, this is going to be a bug. So I'm going to delete the photo, and then it's going to say here, hey, logo is declared, but its value is never read. So this is like a soft bug, right? It's not like crashing your code. But if we run npm run build, just to let you know, the software that does this checking and create React app is called ESLint, ECMAScript lint. So it's like a linter. It goes through your code and makes sure that everything is good. And look at this, right? When we ran npm build, it said it compiled with a warning, right? So sometimes, and in fact, I would advise this, usually projects shouldn't build with warnings, right? When you're developing, it's okay. But if you made a mistake, that's really bad. And it's even worse, right, if your thing introduces a bug. So if I remove that opening brace, and then I run npm run build again, it's going to say, hey, there's an error. It failed to compile, right? You know, there's something missing. And this is, it even said it expected an opening brace. So great. So we're doing good. And obviously, you know, this is a really trivial error. I could have caught it. But the important thing is how can we make sure that we never push changes like this to our production side, right? No, we don't ever want to have a situation where we push broken code. So the way you do that is with something called continuous integration. So continuous integration is kind of similar to continuous deployment, which is Netlify, right? It's just like auto builds every commit. Continuous integration is when you run a test every time a commit has been made. So every time a commit has been made, you can say, hey, run a few scripts or check something. And if it doesn't work, there's a problem. Okay, so how can we do that? One really convenient way is in GitHub. So GitHub has this thing called GitHub Actions, and it's a CI service. And yeah, that's really it. If you go to the Actions thing in a repository, it's very convenient. You can like click a button and it does all this for you. So I'm gonna hit this button. And yeah, it creates this file called Node.js YAML. YML is a YAML extension. If you're not familiar, this is like a superset of JSON. It's very popular with Ruby. Don't really worry about it. But it has some stuff. I'm not going to really go over how all of this stuff works in depth. You can check that out, but you'll just have to kind of take it for granted that this works out of the box. So we'll do this. And then, yeah, once this is ready, we can do start commit. And in this case, I'm going to say, hey, do you want to commit to master or do you want to make a pull request? Well, I'm going to say, let's make a pull request because I have an inkling that this is going to fail because there's actually a slight difference between this and what I want it to be. I'm going to do that. And let's call this add GitHub Actions. Great. So GitHub Actions, you know, as I mentioned, after every commit, it's going to run something. So in this case, the default action that we've set up while we just wait for the action to run is npm build and then npm test. And so the create React app actually comes with some default build and test options. So it's very convenient. So the build option is what we just went over. And then the testing, they included this one test. We'll talk about tests in another video. So I'll kind of have to wait until that. But for now, you can just remove the npm test on. But this is going to fail. So here it says, uh-oh, npm CI, you need to have a package lock.json, and we actually don't have one. We have a yarn lock. That's not good. So there are two ways we can fix this problem. One is I can switch and make a package lock.json, and then the other is I can switch the action to use yarn. So in this case, I'm going to choose the latter, which is to switch the action to use yarn. But you can pick whichever one you prefer. It doesn't really matter. But yeah, so, I do not remember. Where is the thing? There we go. I'm pretty sure it's this one. So there are a lot of different things you can do, but in this case, I'm just going to copy paste this because I did this last time on a different thing. So I'm going to say, hey, okay, I agree. There's a problem with that pull request, so I'm going to change that file. And I'm going to do it from the website because it's a video that I'm recording, but you shouldn't do this. You should do it on your computer. But yeah, I'm just going to change that. So very quickly, just a very brief overview. See, like, oh, this is the name of the thing. We're going to build this on master. What versions of Node are we going to use? And then what actions do we run, right? We're going to check it out. We're going to run yarn install. We're going to run yarn build, X, Y, Z. So again, definitely encourage you to read more documentation if this is something you're interested in. Or you can always talk to me or Leah about it and help you out. But just in terms of the interest of time, I'm not going to make it go over the syntax. Yeah, so I updated the thing. And that was good because it stopped us from pushing something that would fail the test. So it's going to do a bit of work. I think this is going to be hopefully very quick because it should work pretty easily. We will see. Uh-oh, it failed again. Why did it fail? What? Didn't I just change this? Now I'm confused. Let's go to details. Let's debug. I thought I changed this to not use. Am I what we would call not smart? Let's find out. Let's do some investigation. As you can see, this was a very well-prepared lesson. See, this works. So why doesn't this work? I have an inkling. Let's make one more quick change. It just might be a lag. Okay, I think this is gonna work. So yeah. Anyways, we'll wait a bit for this to happen. You can skip this in the video if you want, but it'll just run some code and it'll make sure that everything works. Yeah, there's a lot more stuff you can do with GitHub Actions. You can run tests automatically. You can even have it do the CD stuff we talked about, so like publish it to AWS or publish it to Heroku or something. But in this case, it's a little more complicated than we need, so we're not going to really worry about that. The important thing that I want to demonstrate was when we made the pull request, it told us if it failed the action. So this is another important part of that Git workflow that we talked about, right? Basically, it runs npm build every time. So we know that if there's an error or a warning, it'll tell us before we merge. And you can even make a setting so that it's required. You can't merge unless it passes all of the tests. This is a really big part of software development, test-driven development, and unit testing, integration testing. And we'll talk about testing more later, but just something to think about. It's an important concept. Okay, this is now running long enough that I think this is gonna work. Yeah, look at that, complete job, we're chilling. In this case, we're gonna run it on 2 different versions of Node, the LTS and the latest version. It's not super important, but yeah, everything is great. So we'll refresh the page. Still not done yet. Ah, it's done. So now we can merge the pull request and we're chilling. Life is good. Okay, so in that slightly longer than it should have been example, we went over 2 different things. We went over CI with GitHub Actions. So how can you make it so that you run something every time your code gets committed or changed? And continuous deployment. So how can we deploy our code every time something's pushed to master? So these 2 things are really useful. And in fact, I would encourage you to add them at the beginning of every project. So don't make a bunch of changes and then add these, because what might happen is you make a bunch of changes, you add them, then you realize that you have a bunch of bugs in your code and you have to fix them, kind of like spraying them, right? Versus if you make your boilerplate code and then add these from the start, every time you make a change, you'll already know if there's a bug. And this makes it a lot easier for you to catch these kind of bugs in development and not in production. So it's kind of a win-win for you. The more things you can automate, as long as you can trust the automation, the easier your life becomes and the less bugs that you write. Great. Okay, last thing I'll talk about, and then we'll end this video. So this domain that we got for our thing, like, sucks. Like, I can't tell a kid to type in modest, high bit, blah, blah, blah. So how can you change this? Well, use this thing called DNS, which is the domain name service. And DNS basically controls when you type in like words into your browser, how it points to some random computer in the internet. And that's where the website is actually stored. DNS is actually really complicated, especially once you look into load balancing with things like Cloudflare. But for now, we're not going to worry about that. We have a very simple use case. So I want to redirect something like editor.uclaacm.com. It's like a very convenient, nice domain, and point that to our Netlify server. So how does that work? Well, we actually do that at TeachLA, so I can tell you. I like the login screen. It's a lot better. But Netlify supports that. So if you go to your settings for your site and go to domain management, you can add a custom domain here. So you just type in the domain here, and then it works. Okay, but that's kind of putting the cart before the horse. How do you get a domain? Well, you can buy a domain, or you can get one from someone else who's bought one. So there's one website that I use often, which is called Namecheap. This is not a sponsored video, but this is just the one that we use. And I think ACM uses this as well. So one option is you go into your account, you do some settings, blah, 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 blah. Another option is you just ask someone else to do it for you. So at ACM, we are the people who do it, and I actually don't even have DNS access. You have to ask someone on our dev team. But basically, you need to make this thing called a Cname record, and it's like one line of like code. So it's very, very easy to do. And a Cname basically says, hey, take some other domain and point it at another domain. So take domain A, point at domain B. So what you'll do is if your website is going to be, leoiscool.com, you can say, hey, take leoiscool.com and point it at modest high beat -e97347.netlify.app. That's it. Then you press a button, you commit your changes, and you're done. And then you just tell Netlify as well, and that's it. Easy peasy lemon squeezy. It used to be a lot harder when you had to manage your own web server and all these different kinds of things. And I had to do that when I was in high school and I ran a bunch of PHP services. But now your life's a lot easier. People do it for you, and it's still free. I'll also point out that Netlify will do SSL for you. So if you are not familiar, this just has to do with this thing called HTTPS and SSL/TLS transport layer security stuff. Basically, when you're on Google Chrome, right, it'll say like, oh, your connection is secure if you have HTTPS configured properly. But some websites don't have that. So for example, the main ACM website doesn't have that. So if I go to uclaacm.com, it'll say, oh no, your connection is not private, your cert is not working properly, uh-oh, bad things. And you can go to advanced and go there, but that's pretty scary. So if you want to disable that, you have to do this thing called create an SSL cert. Turns out it's very easy to do automatically now. Netlify will do it for you, GitHub Pages will do it for you, and you can get one for free from CertBot. As for this thing, I'm working with the dev team right now to fix it, but just something to keep in the back of your mind. I would make sure that you do that. But it's very easy to do, so don't worry about it. Okay, this was much longer than I thought it was going to be. Let's do a quick summary of what we talked about and how it's relevant to you. So I created, from start to finish, a Create React app application. We talked a little bit about the Git workflow. So first I showed you how to easily just commit to master from your command line, and we can just see the changes. But then we talked about the more common Git workflow, which is you make a new branch, you check it out with the git checkout command. Then you make your changes on the branch. Then once you're ready, you make a pull request. So you push to the branch, then you go on the GitHub UI, you make a pull request, you type out a nice little description that explains what happens. And then you should ideally ask someone else for a code review and say, hey, can you look at my code? Does this work? Once they say yes, then you merge it. And that's how you make changes every time. So that is, again, a lot better because it minimizes contamination you get when multiple people work on the same code base. We also talked about CI and CD, or continuous integration and continuous deployment. So for continuous integration, we talked about GitHub Actions, which is a way that you can configure GitHub to run some commands after every commit. And in this case, we ran some very basic commands that just made sure that your project built without any errors, but you can add many more if you want to. Then we talked about continuous deployment with Netlify. So continuous deployment allows you to, after every time a commit is made to master, publish your site to some URL. And so that means that it's very easy for you to make some changes and showcase it to other people, or walk back and forth with like a product manager or something with new changes that you've made. Netlify also has a lot of other convenient features, like building pull requests, like doing TLS and HTTPS automatically for you with custom domains, and many other things that we didn't really talk about today. Finally, I briefly mentioned what DNS is and how you can get your own custom domain, and that it's very easy with Netlify and GitHub Pages. But yeah, that is it for this longer than intended lesson. Thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Since you are guaranteedly watching from home, if you had any questions about this video or any other videos, please comment or message us on Slack or something, or let us know. You can always ask us anything. And if you have questions about this general stage, because this is pretty confusing stuff, and there's no class really where you learn this kind of stuff, but it's really important to modern software engineering. Again, please ask me or Leo. We'd be glad to help you out. But yeah, it's 9:22 on a Friday. I need to eat dinner. But thank you for watching. Really appreciate it. Stay safe. Have a good weekend.